Beneath the surface is a special place. Beneath the surface is where extraordinary happens. Designations, visiting cards, fancy cars. Now, whatever may lie on the surface, delve a little deeper, and that's where you will find the hunter-gatherer, the predator. That's where you will find lurking the real, way beneath the surface.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Adan Corporate's very own podcast, A Done Deal. Today I have with us Mr. Mike Kemball. Mike is a sales transformation expert with over 30 years of experience as an accomplished interim sales director and managing director with experiences spread across telecom, technology, and industrial sectors in Europe, India, Africa, and the Middle East. He's managed companies which were typically between 10 million and $300 million in revenue and has led sales teams from 10 people all the way up to 250 people. Mike is an experienced hands-on change agent and a troubleshooter, and he converts the high-level strategy into the reality of the day-to-day sales operations. His work is done when change is embedded and the organization operates at the required higher level of performance. And today, Mike has kindly agreed to share his thoughts and experiences on change management. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Keshav.
Welcome again. Today, we will be discussing change management and turnarounds. And Mike will share some simple techniques and driven by his experiences to drive change and turnarounds using the push versus pull strategies. So, Mike, you're a big believer in execution, aren't you? Often delivering results by harnessing what it drives people as opposed to just the numbers. How do you think this applies to businesses, and what's your secret sauce in making it happen?
I love the secret sauce. Yeah, it's I think you and I both, come up through London Business School. And so you grow up, businesses follow a very logical approach to strategy and planning, which is really based on mathematics, and it's a very, very strong foundation. However, in business, when you come to execution, it comes to people, and it comes to people. Either it's the people in your own organization who've to deliver the strategy that you've got, or it's people like customers, suppliers, all these different parties, regulatory authorities, and various other, all these other stakeholders.
Correct.
And they're driven by people, and people are driven by emotion. What I tend to experience as well, the more pressure the situation becomes,
Yes.
and the more pressure people feel they're under,
Yes.
the more the emotion tends to override the logic. And this is often where you see people throw their hands up in despair and say, what else can I do? And I think what I'm really saying is what we can do is we can harness that energy and that the power within people, and that combined with the logical planning approach makes it a much more powerful approach. And so I'm a great believer in using what drives people and tap into that. And too often people ignore it.
Okay. Motivation is a strong word. It's the power of human intent is really unimaginable.
Yeah.
Could you please give us a couple of examples as to how you approach what would you do when you get in there? What do you think are Could you maybe give us an analogy to how things work uh, in such situations, please?
I think I used to be sort of parachuted into countries and things, particularly with acquisitions or subsidiaries, which had gone um, pear-shaped,
Mm,
uh, and were going out of control fast.
okay.
And the first thing, uh, what I often found is what people told me were the problems
Hmm.
before I went into the country.
Hmm.
They were the symptom rather than the cause.
Yes.
And really, you've got to get down to the cause. And numbers and reports tell you part of the story,
Correct.
but you need to find out what's going on the interaction. So, for
Hmm.
example, in one case, I was parachuted into Denmark
Okay.
with uh, with um, with one of the board members.
Okay.
The managing director in Denmark was fired. It was an acquisition that had gone pear-shaped.
Okay.
Um, I was introduced to the Danish board. This is Mike. He's
Okay.
not Danish. He doesn't speak Danish. And
Okay.
we've just hired your managing director.
Okay.
And Mike's your new managing director.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.
and then,
Talk about being
uh,
thrown in the deep end.
so I'm there with the people. And what
Okay.
do you do?
Right.
And so what I would do is typically is get people talking,
Okay. Okay.
because one is they're not going to listen to me. So the
Mm,
first thing, I need to understand what's going on inside in their heads.
right.
And
Okay.
really, I look for two things. People are really driven by two things. They're either moving, well, it's a mixture of they're moving away from what they don't want. I call that
Yeah.
the pain.
Okay.
So if you put your hand on a hot stove, and the pain will get you to react, you take your
Yes.
hand off. If
Yes.
the stove wasn't hot, you'd probably just leave your hand on it.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
pain will drive things.
Correct.
However, pain only works to a certain point. It gets people started, that's all.
Yes.
The other side is understanding
Hmm.
where people want to get to. Now, often what I find on the people side is they
Yes.
know what they don't want, but
Mm.
they're not so clear on what they do want.
Mm.
And so
Mm.
part of the dynamic of the discussion. So an example like this, I'd say, so what are the issues?
Okay.
And then someone's got, there's a flip chart in the corner. Say, would somebody like to bring that down? Who'd like to be the scribe?
Mm.
And we start putting the issues down on the flip chart.
Okay.
Now, I'm listening with one ear
Uh-huh.
as to what's actually going on the board, the content, but
Okay.
actually I'm far more interested in
Uh-huh.
what is the dynamics
Okay.
between the group of people. Who,
Mm.
when they listen to, when somebody speaks, do they
Mm.
roll their eyes and look the other way? Or when someone else talks, does
Yes.
everybody go quiet and listen? So I'm looking
Right.
to see who are the leaders, who are the followers, who've been looking on,
Mm.
and you're looking at that dynamic. And all of that is giving you lot of clues. And
Okay.
so, and then, so I'm making notes. Okay, I need to follow up. This issue there, this person over there, what's going on over here?
Hmm.
After about 20 minutes, it begins to dry up a bit. Then
Right.
I'd like to call it, I spice it up a little bit more
Uh-huh.
and then go, look, I'm not going to be here forever.
Right.
But if I discover in the
Mm.
next few months that you're holding back on stuff now, but you knew about
Mm.
it and you were deliberately hiding it,
Mm.
I won't be gentle with you.
Okay. Okay. That's
Um,
well, as Maslow put it in his own words, people often blame their emotions on their needs of survival and safety. So, in such situations, it's either about survival or safety. And how, I mean, what do you think are the forces, the key forces which drive human behavior in such situations, Mike?
well, I mean, absolutely on Maslow's hierarchy, but there's also, as you know, with Maslow's hierarchy, as you just pointed out, you
Mm,
can very quickly transcend from
yes.
a very esoteric state to
Yes.
you're right back to survival. A little
Survival.
bit like some of these films where a plane crashes in the mountains or something, and
Yes.
suddenly
Yes.
um, some people who had a very cushy life are
Yes.
suddenly working out how they're going to get their next meal.
Yes.
And in some ways, the chops and change business is like that. Now,
Yes.
the thing is, it's as part of that. I'm doing it fairly extreme. What I'm trying to do is I try and get the issues out first. So I'm still
Sure.
working on a logical level, still
Sure.
trying to get. Then individually, once we've got all the issues out, we'll produce. That would actually form the basis of an action plan for me. I'll go around and talk to the individuals around that. They will open up a lot more, and because I've seen them in context with other people, I'll go, "What's going on over there? What's going on about them?" And I find when you get people talking about themselves and you get them talking about their own situation,
Yes.
they tend to flow quite freely.
Yes.
If I'm talking about myself,
yes,
or the business or the company, they shut down because they're not interested. And I think this is one of the other things is primarily people don't care about you, your company, your product, your situation. What they're interested in is themselves.
Yes.
So the key thing is get them talking about themselves. You find out what their drivers, either the towards, the away from, or the toward. If those drivers aren't very strong, you've got to wind them up a little bit. I call it twisting the knife.
Okay.
Yeah. And so you've got a bit of pain. And someone will say, well, I'm not very happy about this. And you go, really? So what aren't you happy about? And what happens if we don't deal with it? Or you don't deal with it? What'll happen then? Okay, so this could go out of control. That'll affect your commission. That could affect your job. You could be fired. So you see what I'm doing here? I'm ramping it up.
Yes.
And they're going, my God, I didn't realize it was that seriously. Because fundamentally, you've got to position yourself as between, as a way to get them from where they don't want to be to where they want to be.
The proverbial bridge.
So you position, if they see me as the bridge between the two, they'll buy into that. Now, there's two things there. Firstly, they've got to feel it's worth making the journey, which is why you've got to ramp up the emotion.
Yes.
Yeah. And secondly, they've got to believe that you can take them to the promised land. And so you've also got to get, while you're stoking them up, is part of that, you've got to get is your credibility has to come across. Right. Once you've got that, and you've got a clear plan, so the logical side still comes in, you've now got the energy and the drivers, as well as the plan and the strategy to go and execute it.
Right.
What I tend to find is, and often I get given a situation where other people have gone into and made the situation worse because they're only applying that logical approach.
Right.
Whereas, I mean, in one example, I think it was this one in Denmark, it was the operations guy. I'd been there about 2 weeks and we were going through some stuff. I think I had to go make a presentation to the board the next week.
Okay.
He said, you know what, I've had more quality conversations with you in 2 weeks than I've had in 3 years with the previous guy.
Okay.
And I think that because I'd tapped into him as a person. Does that answer what you were saying?
Yes. And that's quite insightful, Mike. It's funny how people react and change once you tap into their emotions. Of course, in a subtle way. It's at the end of the day the good old rivalry between the dynamics of push and pull, pushing away from pain and pulling towards a future which they want to be a part of. Could you shed some light on these techniques and which ones worked better for you, and in what context, the push dynamic versus the pull dynamic?
Yes, I mean, I think I draw on here on selling. I've got a lot of many years in selling, and particularly more to the sort of solution approach to selling.
Sure.
I think the old days of the foot in the door salesman, in the old days when people used to come around and sell encyclopedias door to door, And the trick was to get your foot in the door. Once you got the foot in the door and they couldn't close it, you were in there, and you didn't leave until you'd made a sale. I think those days, they're pretty much gone. I still see a lot of people using them, but I think it's harder and harder to do. One of the reasons is people aren't able nowadays to make, with the lockdown and everything else, they're not able to make a physical call. So the days when you had, if you didn't like someone, now you can just press, leave the meeting, press that little red button in the corner, and they're gone. So instead of pushing people, what you need to do is you need to draw them out. And if you get them talking about themselves and what drives them, what they don't want, what they do want to think. One is people love talking about it. And when they're talking about themselves, it gives you a chance.
Yes.
You've got to guide the conversation.
Yes.
As soon as I try and push something onto somebody, so if I was to try and push something onto you now, your first reaction would be you'd push back and you'd get resistance.
Thank you very much. Yes.
And the more I try to push onto you, and the more you'd resist, the more you'd push back.
Yes.
And all it does is escalate until you throw me out or press that little red button and exit. So it's not a way of. So what you've got to do is do the opposite.
Okay.
I need to do, and sometimes people, you do the opposite of what they expect.
Okay.
I do this, and one of the things I teach people in selling, particularly in the early stages, you're trying to qualify whether somebody is likely to buy your product or not. It's before you start coming into anything else, is this potentially a client or not? Because your time is probably, as a leader, as a business owner, as a salesperson, your time is probably your most precious commodity.
Correct.
And so you need to invest it wisely. So so part of the thing is you got them talking, you say, I'm really not sure this is what you want. You said you want this and that. But I'm not really convinced you're really that keen to grow your business and improve your profits that much.
You want it to come from them.
I don't really believe you're prepared to do what it takes. What do you mean I can't? And suddenly they start pushing the other way. And then now they might go to, you know what, Mike, you're right. From my point of view, I'd rather know that right at the beginning.
Yes, of course.
And likewise, when you're in change management, now I might come into that. I like to think I can bring most people around. There might be one or two people over there that are not going to move. And they're going to block everybody else. Now I need to know that at the beginning. And sometimes you're going to go, now I'll have a heart-to-heart. I'll draw them out and I'll say to them, look, I'm not asking you to make a decision now. I'd like you to sleep on it overnight, talk to your wife, your partner, whatever, husband, whatever, or think about it over the weekend. And when we meet again, then you can tell me what you'd like to do.
Okay.
And then we go from there. Now, sometimes at that point, I've got to push, and I might be at that point. I make a decision to push them out.
Sure.
And likewise, sometimes I find, in particularly the more delicate situations where you want to pull. An Italian once described it to me about selling. We were doing some work in Italy together. And he said, no, Mike, it's like making bread. You have to work it. You have to push it. You have to pull it. You have to push it. You need that dough. Yes. And that's how you make it. You don't just push, and you don't just pull. You need the dynamic of the two.
Right.
And so what you want in a conversation is it's got to go backwards and forwards.
Yes.
And it's like a game of tennis. The ball's got to go over the net. And the more it's going backwards and forwards, the more people are engaged. And the more the other person is engaged.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
And that is that stokes the fires. It stokes the energy to make things happen.
Yes. Yes. What starts off as a classical singles tennis match soon becomes a doubles tennis match where you and the client are on the same side, and I suppose it's about driving home the point that we are on the same side as opposed to being on opposite sides. So that's a fascinating example, Mike.
And this is what I meant about the dynamics. So by taking a purely logical, mathematical, engineering approach, we're going to do this, that, and that. We're going to drive it down the line. Okay. Yes. but you need that human engagement all along the way. You need to work it.
Okay.
And that's where the pull and the pull, push and the pull come in to drive it. And like you say, then you're on the same side,
Yes. Yes.
like fighting a common enemy, if you like, or
Yes.
pulling in the same direction.
Yes. Yes. So with startups and with small mid-sized businesses, Mike, the focus is often on the product and
Yeah.
taking the product to the market, right? To get that product market fit. But
Yep.
somehow the focus is always about the product, not so much about the market and the feedback. Um, so I suppose one can use this technique of the push versus the pull and a combination thereof to figure out what really works in the market and what doesn't. And if it doesn't, you take that feedback, you go back to the product engineering or the product development team or the services team, you make those changes and then reintroduce the concept back in the market. Um, it's something that most startups fail. What are your thoughts? Any parting thoughts
I
on that,
think
Mike?
I think it's a very good point. I think too often
Mm,
people who don't have a background in sales and see it as it kind of think, well, I need to get a sales specialist, or I want to get a
mm,
super salesperson who's
mhm,
going to do this. When you launch a new product
mhm,
in an existing company or as a new company and as a new business, and I've been on all the different sides of the fence.
mm.
One is when you've got something new, particularly if you put your heart and soul into it.
Yes.
It's a bit like a mother with a new baby.
Mm,
You can't tell her it's ugly,
mm.
and and so and um, and business owners are the same, or people starting out their new business are the same thing.
Yes.
They're going out with all the passion
Yes.
of the converted, and
Yes.
they're going to tell everybody about it, whether they want to hear about it or not. And it's the same thing. The more they push it into people, the more
Yes.
resistance they get.
Yes.
And by actually, what I tend to find when you launch a product,
Mm.
normally it's never 100% right. In fact, you
Yes.
could argue a product is never 100% right, not for
Yes.
all people.
Yes.
But often what it is, it's 90% right or 99% right. And
Mm.
actually, it's a few little bits on the outside that
Yes.
create the difficulties.
Yes.
But the baby itself is beautiful.
Yes.
It's just got a few markings on it, which can be cleaned up.
Yes.
And I think by the owner going out and engaging with people, one is people love a founder and an owner, and there's an honor it, even if it's quite a small company.
Yes.
And and to hear that, but at the same time to listen to people's feedback, to
Yes.
understand it,
Yes.
and get it. One is it allows you to enhance the product, and
Yes.
maybe add some other bits and pieces, and take away a few things. Often we're not talking about very much, and
Mm.
often it's around perception rather
Mm-hmm.
than reality. So it's the packaging maybe rather than the core thing.
Yes.
And by bringing that in, is one is you're getting one is you're beginning to sell the product, which
Yes.
is key because you
Yes.
want the revenue in, you want the product sold and things like that.
Yes.
Secondly, you're getting precious feedback,
Yes.
particularly in the early stages of
Yes.
how you can enhance the product,
Yes.
and then go out again.
Yes.
And by using that dynamic of push and pull,
Yes.
you feel less threatened,
Yes.
because you go in there and say, tell me about your business, tell me about what you're, and once in the business context, you know what their drivers are. What
Yes.
are the problems they're facing in their
Yes.
business at the moment, or personally, if it's on that kind of
Mm-hmm.
product,
Mm-hmm.
and where are they trying to get to? How would they know they've got a successful solution? How would they
Right.
know that? Once you've got that, then you know
Yes.
where to position your project. And we're back
Correct.
to being that bridge again
Correct.
between the
Yes.
two.
Yes. And that's an incredible point there, Mike. Um, the reasons for most failures in startups is that they fail to execute a proper sales strategy, or they execute the sales strategy too soon. What I like to call premature escalation. Uh, maybe maybe a topic for another conversation, another podcast, maybe the next one, Mike. We can talk about
Yeah.
um, scaling up too
Premature
soon.
escalation. I think
Premature escalation. Uh, but yes, it was lovely talking about the push versus pull techniques, Mike. Grateful for your time and your insights today. Um, Thanks very much for being on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Mike Kemball, the turnaround specialist and the sales specialist. If you'd like to get in touch with Mike, please drop him a line at Mike, M-I-K-E, Kemball, Kemball, at adancorporate.com. You can also view his profile on our website to understand a little more about his experience and the transactions he's worked on. Um, Again, lovely having all of you on the show. Thanks very much. Have a good day.
Thank you, Thank you, Keshav.